end-user community of librarians were a key set of people who needed to become involved in embedding and promoting NREN services. And the Tandem survey had not quite included that group at that point in time. So there was a space for actually moving on from the Tandem survey and doing a wider set of looking at requirements then of the librarian community. Additionally, we saw that one of the areas, the prioritized areas, as a result of the Tandem survey for end users was open access data repositories. And obviously this is an area that librarians would be expert in, and therefore we should move towards trying post-Tandem to do something about this. At that point in time, we also identified some institutional weaknesses that may inhibit this from happening. In fact, Cecile Coulibaly, she just mentioned quite a few of them in the setting up of the virtual university in Cote d'Ivoire. And here are some other studies. They're also quite recent. A study done in 2015 about librarian skills, again identifying issues around institutional problems such as lack of funding, lack of the skilled personnel to carry out the training, and another study on open access awareness, again identifying issues related to budgets and funding, skills, facilities, computer resources. So we do really realize that there are some institutional weaknesses, but how can we deal with them? There's also another issue, and that is that there are bigger issues affecting the librarian profession, not just in the African region, but globally. And these have to do with issues such as digitalization, and we have seen how the digitalization of content, of various types of media, how that has affected economies the world around. It has affected business models, and it has affected the work that librarians do, because traditional contents are moving towards digital contents, and they need to be managed differently. Convergence as well, convergence of IT and communication technologies, making hardware cheaper and faster, and making services available ubiquitously all around in the cloud and so on. This has made access to information available on request. This whole digitalization movement leads to something we call dematerialization. So it means that what used to be tangible is now becoming virtual. And that means the skills that we have developed over the years to deal with physical objects, they're changing. So it leads to de-skilling, reskilling, and upskilling. Another issue comes from how the university itself is changing. The way the university interfaces with its students is changing. The way it interfaces with business is changing. The student becomes a customer now. There's this idea that services should be available all the time. There's an emphasis on multidisciplinarity, globalization of higher education. So quite a few issues for the higher education sector, as you can see here, relating to almost everything that universities do, and very much to activities that would come under the remit of librarians. Also, another challenge is in the area of the open movement, which is seeing it's a philosophy that allows for the access, the free access of information and knowledge, and we all know about these open data, open access, etc. That is also putting pressure on the way librarians work. And as a result, we're seeing some key roles emerging, such as some that I have here, all around information. Information retrieval, seeking, literacy, organization. These are all roles that are developing now that librarians need to undertake in ways that will support researchers and teaching staff both. There are also some specific digital roles that I wanted to mention, roles around the management of the technology that has to deliver these digital resources. and roles around becoming a specialist in areas to do with seeking knowledge about specific subject specialisms. And an interesting one I have here at the bottom is librarian as an information and knowledge manager. Now this is interesting because if we think of information now as a sort of an asset, something that a university has, that it can bargain with, that it can, that it produces, that it trades on, if you like. If we think about it, then librarians are very much in the frame for becoming information managers. So not only would they be responsible for the normal and traditional activities of a library, but also for taking this thing, information, and making policy about it, making decisions about how information should be acquired, how it should be shared, how it should be deployed, etc. So information management is not necessarily about the technology, but more about these aspects. So about the whole cycle around information. We know this as well. This is the information hierarchy. Data to information to knowledge. Librarians need to know how to structure all of the processes around these three main aspects of information. This means that a librarian could become responsible for things such as the governance of information, not just as it applies to the library scenario, but as it applies to the whole university. Establishing standards and policies around information as it applies to the whole university. Identifying information needs, management of information resources, data, ensuring the data accuracy and timeliness and integrity. For example, librarians could be responsible for data protection issues within a university, for data preservation and curation, knowledge management, and security and privacy concerns. So this all means that we're having this shift from traditional roles around information, which librarians would normally undertake, to new roles, such as information literacy advocates, information access providers, information resource managers, all specialisms, and wider managerial issues, such as policy making, strategizing, and dealing with technology. Some years ago, this little quote was written about the emerging role of the academic library, and it was identified at that point that there is an issue around involving libraries in the important running of universities. Libraries were looked at as a place where students could hang out, a hall, a place to reserve books, sit down and read. It was not given enough of a share of the academic funding. It was on the periphery of decision making and often not involved in policy development. And the idea is to shift the role of the library from this view to something more dynamic, which includes things like changing librarians' roles and responsibilities, developing what they call a service-oriented model, providing free and equal access to information, keeping up to date with ICT developments, learning about and leading digitalization efforts, understanding new schemes in learning and teaching, new business models and new regulatory frameworks. So these are what we call the upskilling of librarians' roles. So beyond the traditional roles, things that kind of lead to more of a shaping role, which would then allow libraries to become more central to the way in which universities work. So we're talking a lot about institutional factors, and what do we mean by that? Well, these are some of the issues that would constrain or enable librarians to carry out these new roles. So structure, the structure in which the university, the library is placed within a university. The role played played by library function, for example, when it concerns supporting teaching and research, how that library function is integrated with other support facilities, such as the IT function. Do they work together or against each other? Rules, regimes, and standards. The rules of the game, how libraries actually function, what the constraints are that they're working under, what they can actually change. Norms. These are institutional logics, things that are deeply ingrained within the way in which universities work, that libraries must function under. And things like culture, organizational culture, professional cultures, and crossovers between professions, boundary crossings. So when librarians have to take on more technical roles, then they have to cross over from professions of the normal keeping and knowledge custodian activities to more technical roles. I also wanted to mention this a bit. This is a very old model that was used some years ago to describe how contagion happens with information technology in organizations. And what we find is that universities, with regard to the way they have adopted technology, can get any one of these stages. And the way in which that therefore affects the way librarians can work and operate is either constraining or an enabling factor. Now, on to the research agenda. So what have we done so far? So first of all, the question we're trying to address is how to develop sustainable institutional support for higher education librarians to play a central role in providing services linked to open movements through NREN infrastructure. So you can see all of this builds upon what I've been saying before. The central role is important. What that role consists of is important. Sustainability is important, how we keep that going, how we provide support for this over time, and that NREN infrastructure should somehow help to support that role. So currently what we're working on is identifying some of these institutional factors that constrain or enable this central role for librarians. And we're also currently trying to launch a wide-ranging survey to investigate these issues that are experienced by the librarian communities of practice, and to see what capabilities are lacking or what capacities lacking within these institutions. And our efforts so far, we began this conversation in November, as I said last year, designed a skeleton survey and put it out in the community of librarians that are linked up to the WACREN mailing list. Put that out in January. We got feedback on this, incorporated it, and then took this to the on-the workshop on the 5th to 8th of March in Abuja. Then at the WACREN Libraries workshop earlier this week, we also took feedback from the most up-to-date version of that survey, which was gathered through an interactive Q&A. The feedback, interestingly, that we got from these exercises, well, in general, people are positive about the idea of doing this research, but there were some wide disparities mentioned in our workshop sessions. Wide disparities in experience with digital technologies and administrative roles around digital technologies. We had a few surprises as well. For example, people let us know that actually things like gender, age, and designation of the librarians would actually be contributing factors to this issue, something we hadn't assumed to begin with. Country and regional differences also need to be accounted for because of that difference in the way information technology is incorporated in the universities. It may be at a low level or a high level. Levels of librarian status as well need to be accounted for because of their specialities. They may be in more of a management role or an operational role. And a distinction made between the institutional role that libraries are playing, and the skill sets that librarians have. continue with this work. I'll just proceed to the last slide with the next steps. We want to continue with the further development of the survey. So we have a schedule to try to complete that. I'm also going to be working with Cecile with the French version of this survey as I go along. We're going to try and pilot it at the end of April on the WACREN list. But that last bit at the bottom, which should be at the top, this work is being done with the spare time I have, the spare time that people from WACREN and Eko-Konnect have to help with this. And that means there's no funding, it's not a funded project. And therefore that's why it's taken from November until now to just have a draft ready. So one of my activities as well will be trying to find funding for this project so that it can be sustained and can produce the results we want it to. Alright, so just to acknowledge. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup. On a tous compris que les NREN, c'est celle de la fibre optique, c'est celle des data centers, etc. En définitive, c'est des services, c'est des contenus. Et pour que cela soit efficace, il faut mettre au cœur du dispositif nos bibliothécaires de l'enseignement supérieur. Ils ont donc un rôle très important à jouer pour la promotion des NREN. Je pense que le message est bien passé. Nous recevons maintenant notre amie Anne qui va nous entretenir sur les stratégies, n'est-ce pas, pour le développement de la formation à distance et des TIC en s'inspirant, en partageant avec nous les leçons apprises des outils, voilà, des outils, n'est-ce pas, pilotes certainement, utilisés au niveau de l'Europe et puis aussi d'autres stratégies. Je sais que traduit un peu en français ce qui est en anglais. Merci.
Good morning. My name is Anna Johnson. I'm an associate professor of education at Rowan University, located in southern New Jersey. This title of this presentation seems a lot more technical than the presentation actually is going to be. There was a lot of technical presentations yesterday. Today I will talk more about institutional strategy, what e-learning is in light, and how that gets institutionalized, and even what the faculty experience is like working with e-learning tools. I've been teaching online and using e-learning tools in the classroom for 10 years now. So I have a lot of experience with this, and I feel like there is opportunity to grow from that. Also, of course, Professor Koné and his colleague will be joining me to talk a little bit about what they're doing at the virtual, or maybe actually happening in the classroom, a brick and mortar type of environment, using instructional technology to facilitate student learning. And this includes all of these things, online education, virtual education, blended learning, web-assisted, I do quite a bit of web-assisted teaching, hybrid teaching, flipped classroom, MOOCs, the list goes on. So I'm going to sort of kind of brush up across all of these. Sorry. So here, there's some major trends. In the title I talked about Europe, but I'm going to be talking a little bit about the US as well, because the trends are very similar in nature. First of all, the ones that we're talking about a lot is this notion of predictive analytics. And essentially what these what this is using the data that is produced in the course management system or the learning management system that is conveying the course content to students, and using that data, the interactions that happen between students and faculty, between other students, and the course content to predict whether or not the students are going to be successful in the course or successful in other courses. So there is actually some controversy around this notion as it may be used to dissuade a student from taking courses, or but then also may be used to provide students additional support in the classroom. Obviously, we're talking about personnel sustainability. I mean, this is a huge issue. Making sure that faculty, that student, rather than IT personnel are being trained properly, that they're being retained within the institution. That institutional knowledge stays within the institution and gets diffused. Also, this IT administration, changing the way they are within the institutional hierarchy, that they're included in institutional policy making, not just policy making as it refers to ICT policies in the institution, but they're actually part of the strategic planning process institutionally wide. Obviously, creating more effective relationships between IT, between faculty, between administrators, and then finally, agility of the e-learning tools of the institution, their scalability and their cost effectiveness. Now, naturally, this brings me to this big issue here of cost and quality. And these issues transcend borders. This is a huge issue. Initially, we had this assumption, right, that e-learning would reduce costs in higher education. However, there was a very controversial study that just came out that suggested that, in fact, it increased cost. And that cost gets passed on to the student, and which is not what the original intention was, right? It was supposed to be less expensive for the institution and for the student, but it's not. And then, of course, the issues of quality. Quality fundamentally in e-learning is not, there are lots of frameworks around to support quality. Unfortunately, those frameworks, we've heard it referred to here. This is another big issue in e-learning, obviously, and one that I hear being a part of this conversation in Africa, but also in the States. And why we do them, obviously, was to disrupt the traditional higher education landscape, right? To offer, to democratize learning, to promote things like lifelong learning and education. Typically, the MOOC user, which is obviously a massive open online course, is between the ages of 25 to 40, so it's not necessarily a traditional aged college student that are taking advantage of MOOCs. And they have had a huge influence on the way that we're talking about higher education across the world. And what we know about them is that it's a student in one room, a classroom in one part of the world, may be taking a class that's being produced in another classroom in another part of the world. So it does take advantage of still the institutional brick and mortar, right? The face-to-face interaction, but then the student may, but then also taking advantage of these e-learning tools. Now we're finding, however, that there's only really pockets of this practice because MOOCs are expensive to produce. So we find places like Harvard and Stanford and Yale are the ones that are producing them and really crowding out these lower tier institutions from participating more effectively in MOOC production. And so it's had some questionable success. We see that students, of course, obviously vote with their feet. They go where the qualities, where the assumptions of quality are in institutions. So we see that these lower tier institutions are not benefiting from MOOCs and very well may be losing students as a result of them. But we do find that in lesser resource contexts, there may be a lot of promise for this, as long as there's a focus on, of course, local content and local talent. Now, obviously, if you're going to use these tools, you have to develop institutional strategies around them. You can't just one faculty member using them in the classroom is necessary but insufficient. And so the institution really does need to produce policy around this. And typically, when they produce these strategies, they have a few different aims. The first one is obviously to serve as many students as possible. I mean, obviously, as in light of massification of higher education, that's goal one for a lot of universities, is to serve as many students as possible. Obviously, complement face-to-face instruction. Brick and mortar education is not going away. So the physical facilities are not going to go away. So this is to complement what is already happening on a campus environment, in the built-in campus environment, and enhance the student learning process that's already taking place there. And then obviously to offer more courses and meet demand. We see that the policies the institutions tend to make around structures, around these provisions of core technologies like the learning management systems, like plagiarism software, my institution offers it, it's called Turn It In. And then obviously the resources of the library offices. And then scalability. Then we see things around training and support, faculty development, obviously, student support. Students who are using e-learning, particularly in online education, want 24/7 access to someone to help them troubleshoot. to help them deal with their problems. That's not free. So obviously there has to be some consideration around procurement and policy development. And then obviously evaluating the quality of the courses and their success in conveying knowledge to students. Now, for some of these developments taking place in Africa, obviously there's some challenges, and I don't want to belabor this because I know my colleagues here are very well knowledgeable about this, as you are. And we know what these are. I think this is one that's particularly critical here, is this notion of developing institutions with ICT policies in mind. But then obviously we have a ton of opportunity here too. NREN's, the new investment, there's been a lot of discussion around that, and this increasing body of knowledge about what does successful ICT implementation at a university look like, and what are the tools that we need to do that. And so now I'm going to hand this over to one of my colleagues, and we're going to talk about the creation of the Virtual University of Cote d'Ivoire.
Thank you, Anne. It's difficult for me to speak after the native English speaker, so I will translate in French. Je vais vous parler de l'Université virtuelle de Côte d'Ivoire, qui accueille cette année 3500 étudiants. Donc partager un peu l'expérience de la mise en place de cette université, qui est définie en informatique et sciences numériques. Et cette université qui a été créée et qui est opérationnelle, parce qu'elle accueille déjà ces premiers étudiants, s'est développée en différentes phases dont je vais vous entretenir. Il y a eu donc ce qu'on appelait donc 3 phases. Une phase qui a permis donc le déclenchement du processus. Le déclenchement est axé sur une vision du gouvernement, qui est traduite dans le PND, qui fait donc de l'utilisation des TIC un outil d'accompagnement au niveau donc de l'enseignement. Et cette volonté politique traduite par donc, la création de l'UVCI, l'Université virtuelle par un décret